Welcome to Holly's Pandorium, featuring your host, psychic medium Holly Jordan.
Hi there. Welcome to Holly's Pandorium podcast. My guest today is Nathaniel Gillis, and I am so excited to talk to you, Nathaniel. I have been waiting for this for a while. How are you today?
Doing well, doing well. It's always good to be with new show hosts and new shows and actually put faces to names. So I'm
Yeah.
glad to be with you. I'm glad to be with you tonight.
Awesome. Thank you. So I had a few questions I kind of fed you earlier that I wanted to go
Right.
over.
hmm
But I kind of guess the best way to introduce you is you're a demonologist. And
hmm
so can you describe that for listeners and viewers? What does that mean?
Yeah, so my research consists of understanding or trying to understand the sexual pathologies, the victimologies, and the regular pathology of malevolent beings. Not just what they call themselves, but what they do, the
Okay.
modus operandi. That
Gotcha.
has been my research, and also exploring the interconnectivities between phenomena. So, demons, aliens, whatever we want to call these things. Sure, we're going to get into it. But that has been not my expertise. You can't be an expert. But that has been my focus for the last decade.
Cool. That is awesome. What do you want people to know about what you do? I mean, you kind of just described your research and what's
Yeah.
involved for you a little bit, but if you meet someone and they're thinking they might be dealing with a demon or they're not sure, what would you like them to ask you, or what do you want them to know about
I
what
would
you
try to report anything and everything.
do? Okay.
I mean, a lot of times people think they're dealing with something malevolent, and it's really not. It's okay, they saw something, but it has not made an attempt to contact them or to attack them. Um, at that point, you cross over the threshold of just being observed, and now you're encountering something that wants something from you, wants to do something to you, and that's so that's what I would advise. Document everything, because the research that I'm doing right now is so young, and we need as much information as we possibly can get.
I would have to say, speaking from a medium perspective, I get a
hmm
lot of questions from people who assume that they're being contacted or visited, maybe, I guess is a good word,
hmm
from someone who might wish them harm. And most of the time, I find it's nothing like that at all.
Right,
Um, and I think a lot of it just stems from the fear of the unknown. People just
right.
don't know, the unknown. The paranormal is so terrifying to most people or some people. And of course, not those of us that are interested in the paranormal, excited by it.
Yeah.
It's a different ballgame. But
hmm
yeah, I find that the incidences in my lifetime have been extremely small. Most of the
hmm
time, it's something entirely not to be afraid of.
Right, right.
Yeah. So,
It's I think that's worthy of consideration too. I like to look at all of these case studies, not just the malevolent kind, but even to the point where, okay, at what time did the entity become malevolent, and how did it become malevolent?
right.
And what I've realized, and this is kind of, I don't even know how to articulate this. This has kind of placed me in such a weird category in the field where it's all encompassing. And I think that we need to focus more on those moments when they choose to become something else instead of that benevolent being we like to cuddle with.
Right.
Yeah. How does that happen? That's what I'm interested
Exactly. That's very cool. That's a good question. And I'll share more about this later, but I do have something that I encountered recently on a ghost investigation.
in.
And I did a remote viewing, and there was an entity that had been fine
hmm
where she was hanging out until she saw pornography on someone's cell phone, and it
hmm
triggered a life event for her where she had been brutally raped in this
hmm
particular building. And
hmm
so she wasn't really angry at anybody, it just upset her again. So
hmm
she was acting out, but not in a terrifying way. She was just kind of storming about, sort of,
Right, right.
basically letting people know I'm not
Poltergeist in a
me.
sense, yeah.
Exactly. Nothing terrifying, but rightfully so. And she said I had forgotten. What she explained to me is it had been so long I hadn't thought about that until I saw this thing on someone's phone, and then it triggered me, and then
Hmm.
kind of got stuck in a loop on that. But I thought that
Yeah, yeah, it's so strange. I've read of cases where these mutated ghosts or evolved consciousness, whatever we want to call them, they
right.
do have their own pathology. They even have their own inherited belief system, which I call the inherited self.
Okay.
And a lot of their decisions are based upon previous life, and so it carries on over. I think it's fascinating, and it's so funny because if you would have told me that in when I was in the evangelical movement growing up, they would have crucified you upside down and exorcised you and all this stuff. But once you get into the data, it's quite obvious that there are case studies where you meet beings that are, hey, man, you know what I mean? They have something of the afterlife and that they've carried over from, yeah,
Oh
their
yeah,
regular life. I think it's fascinating.
it is fascinating. Can you talk to me about the first paranormal experience that really locked it
Yeah.
in for you as this is something beyond what is normal, and it's
Yeah.
definitely real for me? What was that like for you, and what was it?
So it was at the open house. My parents were moving from the south side of the city to the north, and so we moved from East Dayton to Huber Heights. Is for the people that are listening to this are familiar with Ohio. Anyways, we went to the open house, and my dad took me into what would become my room in the future. Kind of let me explore, where you're going to put your gaming system because I was 8 years old, where you're going to put your bed. And when I first walked in, there was a pervasive stench present. And there was only one thing in the room that was a bed. Everything else you could visibly see, and there wasn't like, you know, there was certainly no corpse in there. There were no like, organic, I don't know. There was no food that was rotting, but there was something present that I could smell. And later on, I realized it wasn't with my nose, it was something consciousness in a sense. Yeah, and that's what I remember as the first manifestation. The second one was when I got on my hands and knees and looked underneath the bed. It was a full bodied apparition of a little girl, long black hair, very pale in complexion, was wearing a white linen dress made during the turn of the century. And I went like this, flip, see
Yeah.
ya. Right? Not here. This did not happen. I don't know what.
Right.
Um, so later on, my parents talked to the realtor. We get in the car, we leave. For some reason, I thought, again, this is me trying to rationalize the phenomenon, that this was a little girl that belonged to a family in the neighborhood. She
Right.
didn't. She didn't belong at all. Didn't belong to the family that lived there. Didn't belong to anybody in the neighborhood because I lived there for another 6 years, so I figured out she does. She's not in here. She just shouldn't be in here. So really, what was that? Was that a ghost? Was that an apparition, or was that, and this proved to be the case, an entity that
Okay.
had conformed to my innocence,
Ah.
to
So when you
gain trust, to
okay.
gain some kind of consent. And then once I moved into the house, then it mutated into a shadow figure walking on the wooden floors at nighttime, nightmares, suicide, very strange stuff. And so that was my first encounter with the phenomenon.
So I guess that would answer my later question of, do
Mhm,
you believe that demons can actually present themselves as something innocent or
mhm.
childlike in order to gain connection with the person?
Yes. Uh, Again, I believe that we're dealing, and this is my hypothesis, my personal hypothesis, that we're dealing
Okay.
with a singular intelligence that
Okay.
has masked itself as alien, dear Aunt Edna, um, ghosts, entities. Again, it's almost like a program to where, okay, it'll work you. Manifesting as Jesus, Muhammad, Gandhi. And you realize that, okay, this is just the latest mask or the latest cognitive interface that it wears.
Right.
And so what we're looking for now is a way to test the spirits. Can I trust them? And and I think that was instrumental growing up in this field, at least I should say that. because I learned that I can't trust everything that I see.
Correct. That's fair. That's fair. Now, has anyone else in your family had an inkling or been involved
Hmm.
in anything like this that you know of historically?
Not, I don't know how many of them experience. Okay, well, I should say that my family on my mother's side in, I think Mount Sterling, Kentucky, they lived in a house that was haunted. I mean, they had a rocking chair that would rock it every night, just stand and all of a sudden rock it, hear all kinds of stuff, see things. And but in my close family, my my mother and father, it wasn't until like later on that my mother started seeing things. Like she saw an orb, didn't know what an orb was. She went outside of the house one day and saw this. I think she said it was a bluish pink kind of light just floating,
Okay.
and then it just left. So she's had experiences, but nothing to the degree of malevolence that
Okay.
I encountered in that house, thankfully.
That is amazing. So, other than this gal that you saw, what
Mhm.
else have you seen? I mean, have you seen a Bigfoot? Have you seen UAPs? Have you seen
Um,
fairies?
well, the scary thing is, and when this gets to ufology, I wouldn't, I mean, I don't know if I saw a UAP. I mean, I could see
Okay.
it and I wouldn't realize I did. You know what I mean? So I understand what you're asking, but I've seen shadow figures, I've seen apparitions, but I think in terms of, there may have been one time where I saw a UFO, but it could have been a pack of balloons, but it was so high, so I don't really know.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so I have seen some things, but not to the level others have.
Okay. Okay. So, if someone was to contact you
Hmm.
and ask for your help because they think they have encountered a demon,
Hmm.
how does that begin and what do you do? What is that like?
I don't do cleansings anymore. I haven't done a cleansing in 2 years, but
Okay.
what I used to do, depending on what I was picking up from the case, I would either want to know everything or nothing. There was no in between. I had done cleansings with, especially the murder case, where I had no context. Like they knew why they were asking me there. I didn't. I just heard there was paranormal activity. I didn't realize that a murder had taken place there. They had to cut up the carpet, right? So that was weird. So I get there, and the communication that was occurring was very in depth. I got names, I got experiences. I got geography in the house where I saw the victim smoking a cigarette, listening to music at the table. The table itself was the only thing there. The chair that she was sitting on was in the garage. It was just weird. It was weird. So once I got in, everything was, you get more insights and everything is confirmed. Other times, I would like to know, okay, anything, what are your dreams like? Have you been having nightmares? Do you have any scarifications on your body? Is there any history of addiction or trauma,
Okay.
abuse? Is there anything, a history of the occult? And I'm not, again, a lot of those seem like questions a demonologist would ask, but I'm not asking them for the reasons you think,
Okay.
and so that would be my first step.
Gotcha. So you're actually working as a medium when you're going out on these type of cases in the past?
I don't know what I am, my friend.
Okay.
I could tell you this: I've been in two places at once, more than once,
Okay.
and it's been documented. With that particular case, as soon as I got that message, I was walking up the stairs to a two-story building, a house, and I
Okay.
cornered an entity in a closet. Uh, the sister of the victim said, "Yes, I was in that very closet last night," and so it was like this. It
Okay.
was weird. Other times, I've been in houses and picked up very little, and you have to actually do an investigation. So it's weird. I don't know why it is, but yeah, I don't
Well,
know what I am.
I would say, yeah, if you're picking up on things that you've got a couple different intuitive things going on for you, that you're able to be in more than one place at one time, first of all, and just making those connections at another
Mhm.
level than what most people would have.
Yeah, it got to a point when I was dating a girl when I was 15 years old, and I didn't talk to her for 2 or 3 weeks. I was like here,
Hmm.
but I was also in her front yard,
Right.
smelling a man's cologne, reading his thoughts. I was completely aware of the whole situation.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I broke up with her because she cheated on me. But it's very strange. Like I'll be sitting down and I'll get a smell, I'll smell something, and
Right.
and then all of a sudden I'm somewhere else, looking around, and then I'll come back. So I don't. strange. I know in the movement I grew up in, that you would be a big old prophet, ooh, you big old prophet,
Right.
but I don't know what that means. Who
Right.
knows?
I know when I was in church regularly, it was called a gift of knowledge. When I
Word of
would,
knowledge, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And so that was the explanation, that you were entitled to hear things other people didn't hear, or
Well, yeah.
experience other things that people didn't experience other than you. But um, I don't know what it is either. I just know that it's there and it works.
Hmm.
In my
Absolutely.
case, I have a family lineage of it that I didn't realize. I had a great
Hmm.
grandfather that did seances in the 20s and 30s on a regular basis, and by day was an attorney.
Ooh.
Interesting combo. Um,
Yeah, that would stink. I mean, I know you're guilty.
yeah,
Tell
right.
you how I know.
Wow. I don't need evidence. It's all right here.
Absolutely. Hopefully, you guys can see my face better. I didn't realize my lighting was this bad,
Right.
so I apologize.
That's all right. That's okay. So, what captures your curiosity in the paranormal?
Everything. Uh, yeah, everything. I think that I'm no longer satisfied with demonology. Demonology is not say two prayers and I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
There's something deeper at work here. That's why the thing is with me, most people know me as a demonologist. And my very first show ever was so big that literally everybody from that point was like, demonologist. So I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
whatever.
Okay.
Um, but the research that I'm doing is far deeper than that. And I'll even say this, probably far darker. Demons, as we know them, horns and hooves, and people are saying they don't have bodies and all of this stuff. But I think that the evidence suggests something quite different, something more demonic than a demon, something more alien than
Okay.
extraterrestrial. And as it sits right now, our research is the best research right now. We don't even have a vocabulary that can articulate what we're dealing with. All we do know is that there is an intelligence that has manipulated our species, and that it's quite possible it's hidden behind entire religions it's created. And here's the purpose: to stop us from fully understanding that that lady across the street is experiencing something she's labeled, right, as an incubus, not realizing that the same phenomenon is occurring to experiencers, UFO abductees. So strip it all from the labels, and we can no longer be manipulated by the masks it wears. Now we do have pathologies present. We do have bloody footprints. Now we can say, hey, listen, there's victimology here. There's a ritual occurring, and I think that. But I've always been fascinated with like serial killer pathologies, that other aspect of the world that it beckons us, right? Why? Why does it exist? Who are these people? And what led them to do things? So that's what fascinates me about it. I want to know more and in hopes to help people.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, initially, my first scary event that I had was when I was 13, and I
Hmm.
was literally just in the back seat of my mom's Ford Torino at a
Hmm.
stoplight in California, and I literally glanced over at a car to my left, and I could
Hmm.
only see this guy's back of his head and a little bit of the side of his face. But I got this immediate launch into somewhere
Hmm.
else, and I saw him murdering people one after the next. I felt their pain, I felt their fear, I could
Hmm.
smell the sweat and blood on their bodies. I heard
Hmm.
everything that they said. It was as though I was in the room. And so at my age at that time, there wasn't a lot of gore on TV. There weren't a lot of movies. And even if there had been, my mom would never have allowed that in the house because she was very careful about things. But,
Hmm.
we're talking early 70s. So
Hmm.
that information and that stuff that happened, I actually saw decapitations. I didn't know that was physically possible. It was not, I
Right.
mean, I've seen Popeye cartoons was the violent level that I had seen, or, maybe a movie at the drive-in once in a while, but nothing like that on that level. And so the
Hmm.
stuff that I witnessed was beyond my understanding in many ways. The violent
Right.
acts that I saw, and then the feelings that this guy had in committing these acts were graphic and strange. And I had never met anybody that was so power hungry. It was
Right.
very odd
Right.
and strange. But I began to wonder, is this real? Am I
Mm.
just hearing this? I looked around at the other cars. Nobody else is sticking their head out looking, or there was no reaction by my mom. I was the only one that had seen that. And
Mhm.
so I thought, well, gosh, what's happening? And it was haunting. I mean, I can still
I can
see it
imagine.
as vividly as when it just happened. But at least now I've had a chance to kind of manage and monitor the stuff that
Yeah.
comes in and filter things so that I'm not bombarded. I purposefully don't watch the news much anymore because,
Mhm.
just like you're saying, whoosh, I smell something, hear something,
You're
sense,
there.
and I'm right there at the scene. And it's like, there's some things you cannot unsee.
Yeah,
So,
you can't be unseen either.
right.
And yeah, the more evolved we get into these gifts, it and I liken it to seeing beyond the veil. The veil thins to a degree, and you're able to stick your head in and look
Right.
around.
Right.
But that doesn't come without a price, because when you experience, you are experienced. When
Yes.
you see, you are seen. And I've witnessed this in my own life where, you do something, or not even, you don't even have to help somebody. You could just witness. And in my experience, a portion of literature or a sentence or a revelation that they don't want you to have. And next thing you know, boom,
Yeah.
you get a response. I've experienced that. It's interesting, but I think it's necessary because there are people all over this world that are being victimized by the phenomenon because of who they're called to be, because of their gifting,
Right.
because they can sniff out things. No, I mean, no pun intended. Sniff
No,
things
no,
out that otherwise, they would have been ignorant of.
exactly.
And the phenomenon doesn't like to be seen.
That's true.
That is interesting. Now, it can blind us by our own vision because oftentimes we believe what we're seeing is the enemy.
Correct.
But there's something else behind it that I think is it's a lot more. It's a lot darker than we would like it to be.
So, on a personal level, how
Mhm.
draining is this for you? And when you do this kind of work, what do you do to protect yourself?
Draining. Oh my God. It's affected everything in my life. It's affected my mental health.
Okay.
It's affected my relationships. Um, I've had people walk away from me because of this research, crazy or uh, just a lot, a lot. The phenomenon will use mistakes, failures, everything it can, anything it can to keep you at a distance. And I've done shows for 4 hours and it never recorded. I've been on investigations where I'm knocking on the door, knocking on the window, looking at the people on the other side of the window, and they couldn't see me, they couldn't hear me. Where the list goes on. I did one show in Rhode Island where Kristen had headphones on. One entity spoke to another entity from one headphone to the other, and the other entity responded in the other. And they were talking to each other. Freaked her out. So I've been threatened. So I try to tell people that's on social media, and I do it in such vulnerable states that it doesn't come across the way I'd like it to. But the deeper you get into this research, it's not always good.
You keep referring to as it. What is
It
it's your it? Tell me what that is. I have a
it
feeling that my
yeah,
understanding is different than what most people
yeah,
is. I want to break it down for somebody listening. I know
yes,
there's an imagery when we say demonologist or someone that studies demonology. Um, there's an image of a Catholic priest with a Bible
yeah,
and holy water and all of these other little tools and tricks, perhaps some salt or
correct.
not. And in my experience, there's a lot involved with it. And when I approach a situation where I believe something's going on, I know exactly what you're talking about in checking information. I did take a class years ago, which of all places at a Methodist church in Oregon.
Mhm.
And this very astute older gentleman had this incredible list of questions to ask someone to help them narrow down and focus in on what was actually happening in their lives. And most of
Hmm.
the questions had to deal with their surrounding perimeter life.
Right.
And exactly what you were talking about is addictions and family
Yeah.
lineage questions and lifestyle choice questions and all of these other things that people don't necessarily attribute in the way that we think. They
Right.
attribute as this happened to me because I have an attachment. Well, not necessarily. You kind of invited it in because you went there. And
Correct.
so
It,
speak to that a little bit. Let's take that
well,
a little
I've
bit.
had,
Person.
yeah, so let me go to a case study I had that was personally enlightening. Because you have models that you work off of, and okay, this fits, this doesn't, blah 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 blah. Then
Right,
you counter something. It's like, okay, I either adjust or right, or I'm a dogmatist, and I don't want to be that kind of person.
right.
So years ago, before I was even like before people even knew who I was just doing research and cleansings behind the scenes and trying to learn as much as I could about whatever I was encountering. Well, it was during COVID, and it was about 2:30 in the morning, and I'm sitting outside. It's the summertime. It's beautiful out, and I forget what I was doing. Listen to Art Bell or something. I forget. And a friend of the family reached out to me and said, "All right, we're at the emergency room. It's during COVID restrictions.
Oh
We
boy.
cannot go into the hospital, but our daughter is in the hospital, and she had uh, like gastrointestinal issues,
Oh my.
doubled over in pain. We don't know what's going on. She's been complaining that there's been paranormal activity in her house, and we just, we figured we'd call you, and hopefully you can help us. And I'm like, well, I I'll do whatever I can. So instantly, I could just feel the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I have them on speakerphone. This is the stepfather of the daughter, and
Right.
then it's the biological mother that had called. So to my left, there was a man about maybe 50 years old. He had a mustache. He was smoking, and he stunk. He stunk like BO and cigarettes. And his name was Dan. And I said, "This man is a rapist. And this is the only way I can explain it." It was like some power made him manifest and confess. And he began to tell me, I don't know, again, I don't know how to explain it. I can just tell you what happened. Begin to explain to me and express to me exactly what happened to this girl. And when I asked, I said, "Who am I seeing?" The mother started crying. That is her biological father. And he was accused of assault. So I said, "All right." I said, "Now that we know who he is, he's not the entity that's doing all of this." And here's what he told me. He said that his daughter was involved with something to do. She was at a house or something, and she was assaulted by an entity, a man possessed by an entity,
Oh,
and that this entity had created a portal of trauma in her life, and that it would begin to manifest through that mortal portal to her.
mm,
And I said, so then I go from that to now I'm in your living room. I've never been there. There's a fireplace, whatever. There's a chair. There's a couch. And they're like, they didn't know this version of me, man. I'm just Nate.
right.
Kind of
No,
funny, right?
totally
Really
get it.
funny,
Yes.
actually. They're
Yes.
like, oh. And I said, here in about 2 weeks, I'd like you to sit her down. Don't get too explicit. Just say, hey, listen, we're wondering if, you would like to tell us something. Maybe we need to go to therapy with you, whatever, we just want to help you.
Right.
So I told her what happened. 2 weeks later, I get a phone call or I get a text. I think it was boom, everything. So here's what occurred. She went to a party at a college, and I think it was that the friend that met her there wasn't there yet. She's new to the house. Goes upstairs to go to the bathroom, thrown into the room, assaulted, and then months later, the entity that she experienced in that man was manifesting to her in her dreams. And so the way to close that mortal portal is to heal the trauma, close that door. That entity no longer has authority. So there are people who suffer from trauma,
Yes.
not just because, okay, there's an attachment, but the attachment creates that in many cases and then leans on that. So I've been in the presence of people who've attempted suicide.
Hmm.
And where did this heaviness stem from? Well, I experienced this and this. And
Right.
so the dynamic of sometimes they will be attracted to trauma. Other
Right.
times they'll create the trauma themselves and
Yes.
then manifest because of it. So it's a very whatever we're dealing with, it's very predatory and it does work like a serial killer.
It's incredible. And I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Um, this type of situation happens more often than I would like to think about. And I've seen it happen to grown adults. I've seen it happen to
yeah,
children and in all different walks of life, all different situations. But I do feel like there's a commonality in weakness and fear whenever
right.
there's some kind of spot that can be exploited. Um,
Hmm.
and I think from my own perspective, how do you combat that? What do you do? Because I know that there's a fear factor going on with people right now. And so for myself, what I would tell people is communication is number one. When you're
Right.
talking about what you said earlier about recording stuff, it is that you do need to track what's happening, but you also need to establish a point of contact with whoever you're around. You need someone to talk
Right.
to. You need to talk about what's happening, and you need to be very candid about everything you're feeling. And I think that's
Correct.
the trick is we don't want to admit that something is frightening us, or we don't want to admit that there's something weird that we think it's weird, but what if we're just imagining it? We have all of these doubts. And I
Yeah.
think if I could go back in time, I would encourage all of our ancestors from the golden era to stop the deprogramming of children and let it be as it was many generations ago, where
Hmm.
spirituality and unusual things were not so foreboding. They were more
Right.
common. Um,
Correct.
Technology, I think, drafted us into this very sterile environment where nothing strange ever was allowed to happen. And that's not
Hmm.
real, actually.
It's not. I'll tell you what though, what I went through, I had to go through as a kid, and the nightmares that I went through were pretty bad. So I
Yeah.
was in black and white. It was a loop, and the okay, I essentially witnessed two young men sitting on a picnic table with their backs turned towards me.
Hmm.
One young man had a needle in his arm, and I'll go back to what you were referring to. We had no knowledge of this stuff, like we
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Right.
I didn't even know what insulin was. Matter of
Right.
fact, my neighbor across the street told me, "Now, don't tell anybody about my weed." I didn't even know what that was. I just thought that was
Right.
some stupid plan out there, you know. I was so innocent.
Right.
But yeah, the guy on the right had a needle in his arm, and the one on the left turned around, smiled at me, pulled out a 357 Magnum, put it in his mouth. Bam! I wake up paralyzed, and there's this pulsating, just this fear in the room, and so I would go to school with it. I'd wake up with it. I'd take a shower with it. I'd go to bed with it. And so I got into this pattern where I would stay up all night with the lights on. And then when the sun got up, right, you're probably used to this, right?
Oh my God.
The
Yeah.
stuff we do. And then when the sun was out, I'm like, oh man, I get 45 minutes of sleep, you know, but then again, I'm failing classes, failing grades, and I'm, you know, passing out at school, and they're wondering what the heck's going on. That was going on. So I guess what I'm saying here is that I had to create a coping mechanism.
Correct.
And I realized that there were a lot of thoughts that I allegedly was thinking that did not originate from my consciousness.
Exactly.
And so there was this intellectual war going on. And so what I taught myself was this is a fabricated fear. That's what it wants me to do. That's what it wants me to feel.
Right.
And so even in hauntings that I've investigated, there has been this immunity to it because I realize that much of this is designed to conjure terror and it's fictional. And it's like, okay, and once you understand that, there are other people still locked in that mindset of, oh my God. But
Right.
once you've experienced it to that degree, you're like, okay,
That's what it is. Right.
yeah. And I've done cleansings, went out and ate chicken wings before because
Right.
you know,
Yes. Yes.
it's a knowing. It's like, okay, whatever.
Yes.
But don't do you, do I recommend people experience the phenomenon to gain that immunity? No, I don't want you to go through anything like that.
No. I can remember as a young person not being able, and I can't tell you how many times this happened. I couldn't shut my eyes in the shower
Hmm.
because every time my eyes were closed, something would pull in my face. And it
Hmm.
was absolutely terrifying. And I got sick and tired of getting the shit scared out of me.
Yep.
I avoided scary movies because it would trigger things. I had PTSD by the time I was 14. It was crazy.
Hmm.
By the time I was 15 and 16, I was getting mad. I was tired of it. And I
Yeah.
finally went to a metaphysical class and learned to control some of what I was getting. And then
Right.
I learned where my power was and what
Hmm.
was genuinely bothering me and what wasn't bothering me, and to separate the two. And it gave me clarity, but I can agree with you 100%, Nathaniel. I would not recommend anybody go through this. I would love that. That's why I have this meme that I love for people, and I have it on my psychic page, and I'm putting it on my podcast page. Please
Hmm.
listen to your kids. Please pay attention,
Absolutely.
because I think that if I can do anything, I would love for parents, as awake as this generation is, and I love these millennials that are so
Hmm.
much more nurturing. They are into Mother Earth and taking care of things
Right.
like great grandparents did, thank God. And I love that. But there's one more step. We need to get away from, I think I know, I think I understand. Let's
Hmm.
try to be a little bit more open, and let's let the kids talk about whatever they want. And if it's their imagination, wonderful. And if
They'll
it
grow out of it. Yeah.
and if
Simply.
it's not, if it's something else, yeah. I mean, is it normal for kids to see things that aren't there? Sure, kids have imaginations, but then there's other things. I had
Yeah.
things that petrified me to the point that I didn't sleep a lot as a kid. I didn't sleep a lot as an adolescent, just like
Hmm.
what you're describing. It was absolute terror. It wasn't a
Yeah.
little bit frightening. That's why I have no I have an understanding to a point, but when I see people that really love to be scared in a movie
Oh, they
or
have no
I
idea.
and it's like, that's not scared. You don't have it.
No.
And I've told someone the other day who I love dearly, a dear friend who said, "Oh, I love being startled," and I said, "No, you've never been really scared, because if you had, you'd never watch those again." And it's not
Absolutely.
nothing against the horror industry. They have a
Yeah.
niche and they serve a purpose, and I God bless them. They're telling stories in a unique way that we didn't get to see
Right.
growing up. But I'm saying it's for the people that it's a rush and they think the adrenaline, because it matches happy adrenaline and scared adrenaline, feel neck and neck. If
Right.
you need that kind of an excitement, there's other ways to have joy in your life. That's not the way to do
Uh,
it.
it's not. It's not. And I've told
Oh,
people
God.
similar things on podcasts. Hollywood does a good job with what it has to work with.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even in some of these movies about hauntings and possessions, sure you can do your best to capture the facial expressions, the language preferences, but there's nothing that you can do to match the malevolent presence that manifests, that makes you feel like they have access to portions of your existence that you weren't even aware of.
Right.
And that feeding feeling.
Oh, yeah.
They can't touch it. And,
No.
and this is what's so funny to me, and this is why in many cases I kind of get concerned with why people tell me we're going to go to a haunted house, we're going to, okay, it's going to be awesome. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, unless you experience something that's, doesn't want you to be there,
Right.
or, it decides that, okay, I want to pick on some people, and it could absolutely destroy your entire life.
Yep.
Animals can, oh, I got a divorce, or, I got into addiction or something. And so it's like, okay, sure, it's fun and games, And sure, some of it's entertainment up until you meet something that at any moment can just, oh, I'm gonna take an issue with that. I don't even like the collar of your shirt.
Right. Right.
And then now you stepped in something that you're not prepared for and that you gave consent to. And it's just, but that gets down to another little thing. It's like, okay, how much of the research is real research,
Okay. What do you
right? Is it?
what is your version of real research? I mean, we've got and I want to bring one caveat into this conversation right off the bat.
Mhm.
So there was a time in the late 1800s, the spiritualist era, that really perked up in the United States and in Europe. And there were some people, Aleister Crowley being one, Dion was
Yep.
another one. There's a lot of people that were part of different organizations that tried to really bring historical information about spiritualism.
Hmm.
When I say spiritualism, I'm not talking about a particular faith at all. None. I'm talking strictly about the understanding and connection between the human psyche and alternative psyche.
Hmm.
Runs parallel between the afterlife and now, and the veil. And that's stuff that's not connected to any one religion. It's literally just of its own. And so,
Hmm.
in this endeavor of these people trying to connect and bring this into a grasping understanding, Dion in particular talked about her own experience as a young
Hmm.
lady. She encountered what she described as a psychic vampire,
Hmm.
and it destroyed her life for 7 years.
Hmm.
She had poor health. She couldn't stay awake. She was mentally exhausted, and she didn't have any idea why it happened to her and what was
Hmm.
going on. And it was literally an encounter with another woman of the same age who
Hmm.
had been completely engrossed in this entity that took her over. And
Right.
she did a lot of destructive things, not even realizing what was happening. So
Hmm.
when we're talking about research, to me, um, there's life experience, there's
Hmm.
historical knowledge, and there's just straight investigation. And I think now we have to be even more cautious because the internet can be very misleading. It can be
100%.
a
Yeah.
wonderful tool, but it can also be a very big tool for deception also, as does television
Correct.
and movies.
And I think that's where I guess that is the context of what I'm referring to when I say was there real research being done? I'll give you okay, next to like maybe 200 feet away from that house where the murder took place, an incubus case occurred. So I had to go to that house. So I'm in that house, and the husband didn't believe in any of this stuff. He was
Okay.
a veteran and very man's man. I can't fight what I can't see.
Right.
I haven't experienced anything. But meanwhile, the wife is going to bed at night, something's crawling in bed with her. And so, uh,
Gary.
oh, it gets worse. And so I'm at the dinner table, and you could feel that entity moving into that room. And she's shaking the table so hard the dishes are clinging. And the husband's like, I don't know what to do. So my friend and I, we do the investigation, and I should say my colleague. So COVID hits, haven't been there in a while. I go back, and the husband has Bell's palsy on one side of his face. And this is why I kind of harp on what I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
So what happened? He said, well, I was watching a TV show. Okay, all right. He said, and I challenged him. So what? Yeah, yeah. They were challenging whatever spirit they were after. And so, I thought I'm going to challenge whatever this is. I thought, but you see where I'm going.
Yeah, I do.
And oh, okay, one is employed for entertainment value, or at least to get something out of the entity. Bro,
Right.
you got Bell's palsy.
Yeah.
Like, what happened?
Right.
Well, I challenged it, and I went to bed that night. He's like, he said, usually my wife goes to bed before I do, but that night I decided to go to bed with her so I can figure out what's going on. He
Right.
said in the middle of REM sleep, he said it felt just like a man walked by, balled up his fist, and began punching him in his face. And
Wow.
he said the next morning he called off work, went to the ER. The guy that checked him over said, "Listen, you've had significant head trauma. Have you been in a fist fight? What happened to you?" And he's like, "You challenged it." So what we're dealing with again is there's a lot of propaganda out there that
Yeah.
people, when they don't have answers, or even when people like us, they don't do investigations, they
Correct.
have to lean on something, and a lot of the information they're leaning on isn't accurate, and they try to confront things that are, predatory. So I think that's occurring. But again, if the phenomenon has the ability and the knowledge base to conform to our beliefs, if it has the ability to put on a mask and say, okay, I'll be this thing until I get what I want, then be this thing and then it evolves, uh, then we have to consider, okay, are the rules that we believe they're playing by, are they lies? Um, the Carmen Snedeker case, the haunting in Connecticut, um, the idea was that the crucifix above the door frame kept the entity out. That's a rule till you wake up and the crucifix is across the room and now the entity's inside the room itself.
Correct.
Or you conjure them, we're going to stay inside the circle of salt. And then they beat the crap out of you.
Right.
So there are scenarios where it is not just that. I mean, even in the Lesser Key of Solomon and all that, where they led us to believe that there are laws in place that if we follow them, they'll follow them, and then there's disagreement and stuff. And I think that what we're realizing is that for one reason or another, we were almost designed to believe in these laws. Meanwhile, they're operating on their own rules. And that's why, like when I do lectures, I tell people they're playing by their own rules because they're playing another game. And that's what we're trying to understand. What is the game here? Why is it? I know I'm getting past there. Why is it that in witch era literature they savor the blood of hanged men? Who told them that was what was preferred? There again, we see the veil thinning in different periods of history,
Yes.
and we see things that okay, there are subcultures created
Yes.
by the phenomenon, and the question is okay, what's real and what's not?
Right.
Exorcisms that perform, they always work. That's not true. We were told that it's wrong. They do not have the power to kill us. Again, that was a motif that a lot of people operated in. It doesn't fit. Malachi Martin was on the step ladder, getting the book, when a shadow figure walked by and he said, kick the ladder out from underneath him. He lands on the corner of the table from the step. And so there are things, again, that even the church, especially the church, has given us and that we've inherited by our ancestors, from our ancestors, that the model needs to just okay, put it to the side for a period. And let's look at what we can prove and what we know.
Right.
That's where I'm at. And I say that humbly, I mean, with conviction. I'm not being a chump about it. I'm just saying, and the reason I say that is because I went through that myself. You know what I mean? I had to throw it all aside and say, okay, what do we know? What can we really anchor ourselves in?
Well, and that's I think one of the most fascinating parts about this is that there is this cornucopia of subject
Yeah.
matter within the paranormal, and there are a lot of people that cherry pick the things they want to believe in and
Yeah.
cherry pick their exceptions. And I'm glad that you brought up the thing about rules, because we would all like to think that there's order to the universe and that
Oh,
somehow
yeah.
we have the key to all doors, that
Absolutely.
if we just know this one thing or say this one phrase, that all things will open up to us and give us all the answers. And I'm saying, as a psychic for over 48 years,
Mhm.
it's not that simple. It's never been that simple. And
Uh,
I've never been a total psychic, knowledgeable person. I've always been a psychic at work, because
mhm.
every situation has taught me something. Something the hard way, and those you never forget. And there's other things that Now, because of what I've been through, just like with you, I have a compassion for people that are going through things, and I would
Hmm.
very much like to help them. And I'm getting that sensation from you
Absolutely.
as well, because I want people to have their best lives and enjoy things to the fullest level and extent. Is it safe to meditate and pray? Absolutely, it is. But I really would love it to get people to a level where they understand that they need to filter what they swallow. And so,
Yeah, absolutely.
depending your TV programming, your radio programming, everything that you're watching and seeing, my grandfather, the one that was an attorney,
Hmm.
said a few things that very much stuck with me, and one of them was garbage in, garbage out. He wanted people to understand, um, in our family in particular, especially, that what
Hmm.
you subject yourself to comes out of you. And so, just like what Buddha says, what you manifest comes out, what you think becomes, what you
Hmm.
imagine develops, and so on and so on. We attract things, and I explain it to people this way. We have two sources of electricity in our bodies, our brain and our heart.
Hmm.
What you think comes out of you. And when you dwell on horror and you dwell on fearful things, you're kind of tempting fate a little bit. And I caution you to
Yeah,
be
no
aware.
doubt.
Be aware that you're playing with things that you need to be aware of. Sure, it's costume and makeup and stage and la la la, but it's also taking your imagination somewhere where other things live and dwell that are not makeup and stage.
Absolutely. And many of these beings considered an invasion of their privacy or an invasion of their property. Uh, I remember reading ancient literature about, okay, devils and demons live in ruins, and there were case studies of people, oh my God, I'm gonna go. It's a really cool place, and it's like, no, there's something there, you know. There's something that exists within that dimension. I don't know how to explain it, but there's an intelligence present.
Yeah.
I remember one case in the 17th century, um, and I very rarely talk about it because sometimes I'll mess up. I'll say I'll say who it really was. It was a young person, and I'll forget to say okay, it was an adult because some shows won't let you talk about anything like that, which you wouldn't usually, obviously. But I mean, 17th century, a young man, I should say, went out with his father to an apple orchard, and his father says, "Okay, I'll be back in a couple hours for lunch." Have at it. So he's picking apples. Next thing you know, something assaults him and, it possesses him, commandeers his consciousness.
Okay.
And so when this is a Kabbalistic text, but they were exorcising the demon, interrogating him, who are you? Why are you?
Right.
Uh, and the entity said, this is my name. It's how I died. And they said, well, why would you choose this young man? He said, because it was in that same apple orchard underneath that same tree that I committed my first crime. And so stalking their crime scenes is something that I didn't know they could do.
Yeah.
That does sound, again, I mean, even if you get into some of the pathologies, even the scarifications where incubi beings were carving symbols underneath people's eyelids. This is deeper than the current working model, even in Catholic demonology. Okay, what is that? Well,
Right.
that symbol, it connects to a culture. What
Right.
culture is it? Right? Well, forget about that. Just say it to, and that's why, and I think that's why, some people frown on me because I don't abide by one religious tradition of what these are. I have to look at it all and
Right.
then ask myself, okay, is that because of our perception of the phenomenon?
Right. Yeah.
And sift through the humanity aspect of what we're experiencing. I tend to ramble, my friends, so I'll stop.
No, you're fine. You're doing great. You're doing great. Tell me something that you're very proud of that you found in your research and all of your time invested in this.
Oh, um, the connection between UFO abduction phenomenon and demonology.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah, it's and in a way, that's a conversation most people don't want to have, especially ufologists. Uh, I was told at one point somebody brought me up to one of my heroes, and well, to a hammer, everything's a nail, which was
Correct.
lazy, 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 lazy. That individual stopped being my hero. Really, come on, you
Uh,
know. Again, because it's a thought-ending sentence. It
Yeah.
somehow removes the individual from the responsibility of investigating.
Right.
I don't want to do that. I'm lazy, or I don't want to do that because whatever. And
Right.
so what that does is, well, people, oh shoot, why did I think of that? To hammer everything. No, if they really wanted to know what's going on, get into the literature, because we'll realize that the phenomenon is larger than one basket wears.
Right.
I'll remind you that Sybil Leek, a contemporary to Crowley, people, whatever.
Right.
The Collins Elite, which was a group of physicists from the Department of Defense, went to her house when she moved from the UK to Los Angeles, and they asked her, "Can you communicate with these beings
Mhm.
that Alistair conjured?
Mhm.
I've never done it before, but I can try." All right, and boom, instantly. And so they start asking the entity questions.
Right.
Who are you? What are you? Are you a demon? Are you an extraterrestrial? First one, obviously, I think the last one where they shut up about it was, are you an extraterrestrial? They started laughing and mocking them, calling them names. You idiots. That's what it said. You fools. Of
Right.
course I'm not an extraterrestrial. That
Right.
is just our newest deception, which really perked my ears up because if we're dealing with a phenomenon, again, that creates religions to hide behind and philosophies to veil itself with, we're in a predicament. I talked to one of my mentors today about it. The phenomenon this is just a hypothesis, but
I get
there's
it.
evidence. There's evidence to suggest that the phenomenon controls who can witness it,
That makes
and
sense.
then it has the ability to influence that perception, their perception of what they witnessed.
Right.
So then we're dealing with layers of, literally, it could be layers of deception to where what we see is not what is really present. A lady reached out to me. We've been talking for a while, talking about her case study, but she even told me that in her youth, she was being taken by what she thought were cartoon characters. And as she was getting older, she realized that, hey, listen, I'm getting taller and you're not.
Right.
And she said when she started rationalizing it as she matured, one event, she said its eyes began to adjust
Okay.
as it was perceiving, okay, this mask will no longer work. I will have to come up with a new cognitive interface.
Right.
And then she said it stopped. So how much of this can we really trust? When we see UFOs, is that really what's going on? We've seen, in hauntology, we've seen case studies where it's the apparition that we're following, but it's the orb that the apparition is coming from. Which one is the entity?
Right. Good question. Good
And
question.
that's where the real research begins.
Yes. Okay. So, from a person listening to all this information, because we've given people a lot to think about tonight,
Yeah.
we've given people a lot of bits of information. Let's
Mhm.
take it back down to what would you want someone to know or be aware of to avoid contact if that's their goal. If someone says, look,
Mhm.
I enjoy a good scare once in a while, but I don't want to go that far.
Then don't. I mean, there are, okay, so I know people that, one of my best friends growing up, a huge horror fan. Oh my God. Every sleepover at his grandparents' house. His lovely grandma would make us homemade chocolate chip cookies.
Right.
And it was literally a 4-hour event of family videos, not from not family videos, but from Family Video or
Right.
Blockbuster.
Right.
God
Right.
rest their souls. I love
Right.
Blockbuster. But and then I'm watching this, and I'm like, oh my God. And he never experienced anything. He'll tell you to this day, I don't believe in any of that. Then,
Right.
so it's an entertainment thing for him.
Sure. Right.
Uh,
It's for many people.
my,
Right.
yeah, I think that, just be prepared. I don't touch the occult. Um, Again, I know people hate Ouija boards. I think that we're the mortal plural, that the Ouija board is just an assistant. It's just a door handle that we open ourselves up to. So but I don't recommend it, just because we can't test the spirit.
Right.
You know, if we look at yeah, if we look at the information they have access to, I'm not just talking about in demonological works, but UFO abductions. They know when people die. They know all kinds of stuff, and I think that is the information base from which that they employ on us. And we're thinking, okay, it's got to be this person because it knows what this person knows. So right now, my colleagues and I are looking, okay, how do we tell?
Right.
So my advice would be, okay, if you like horror, stick to horror,
Right.
you know, and don't go into houses trying to kick things out, uh, because I mean, I have friends of mine that, we investigated a cemetery. Next thing you know, it starts talking to them, right? It starts haunting them as things start occurring.
Right.
We have enough of this happening to people who are just trying to live their regular lives.
Correct.
We don't need any more case. It doesn't make sense. So I would say, okay, stay in your lane. But if you do decide to investigate this phenomenon, realize what you're leveraging and be prepared.
That's a tough one because I think that's one of the biggest, most fascinating things that I've encountered is that people that tend to be interested in the paranormal have had some contact with it at some point in
Right.
their life. And they're either more curious to find out what else is there or something else has come to play.
Right.
There's something else at work. I have discovered a rabbit hole of other things that I never thought about. I've
Hmm.
had, since I started doing podcasting with Jason Allen, literally just 6 months ago, um, I've met 3 people that swear that they've seen fairies more than once,
Yeah.
in different states, even. And I found information about in Ireland how there's actual laws, physical laws, with
Hmm.
information signs in public places about leprechauns to
We,
not tread in their territories, and so
yeah.
because of that, and it's like, yeah, the fantastic is crossing closer into our world, and the things that are many generations ago, centuries ago, was, yeah, everybody kind of accepted that there were things that were out of this world that weren't part of your everyday life, but they were real. They were just as real. And now we seem to have
Absolutely.
been switching the pendulum way back to another side of it. So yeah, keep an open mind, be careful for anybody
Hmm.
that's interested in the paranormal. Um, Good information starts with you. If you want to know something, yes, research and be curious, and that's great. But please don't take unnecessary risk, and
Absolutely.
don't under any circumstance talk to a demon directly. Do not. Do not.
Yeah, and don't provoke. I think the act of provocation.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and it's just funny to me because I hear people in the field, and I'm starting less and less to identify as a demonologist because people lump me in with this, you know, um, movement where, I know, it's very shallow research. I'm a purist
Okay.
and I have ADHD, so it's all this is interwoven in what my research consists of, and it's like, okay, a demonologist go in there and say the Lord's Prayer and Hail Mary and leave, and that's the extent of it.
Yikes.
When I started, I didn't do that, but when I started encountering the phenomenon, I was like, wait a minute, what am I really encountering here? What am I really dealing with?
Right.
And so that's why I stopped engaging and stepped out on a macro level and said, okay, I need to go through history here and see, what they've been doing, not just what they're doing now. And what I've realized is it's more like a program.
Yes.
It's more like an intelligence that evolves according to our awareness of it. And like I said, right, gauging your belief.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, this is not working anymore. She's not believing this.
Right.
Um, and so, I'm leaning more towards a singular intelligence. But again, with the amount of research I'm doing, that could change within a year.
Yeah.
So, it is evolving in and of itself. But certainly, if you're going to get involved in this research, know what you're doing, and find a mentor. Somebody that could help you along, that can answer questions, that so that you don't have to go through what they went through to get this wisdom.
Right. I think that was one of the best pieces of advice my oldest brother Randy gave me is he said, Holly, whenever you can, learn from other people's mistakes so you don't have to make so many of
Right.
your own. And I think that was kindly and lovely brotherly advice, but I think it applies to the paranormal in a large way, because there's a lot of things we don't understand, but the things
Right.
that we do, we want to share with people because we don't want the stumbling to happen. And we don't want a
Mm.
situation like what Dion went through, where she spent years ill because she had
Mm.
encountered something she wasn't prepared for.
Right.
Ask for help, talk, listen to your kids, and just be happy, you guys. There's a lot of wonderful things in our universe that we have to experience every day that don't involve anything yucky or bad.
Right.
News is scary enough, and the paranormal is a wonderful enchantment away from our newly uh, acquired life that seems to be, post, pandemic nonsense. Um,
Hmm.
I think our pandemic conversations have changed us a bit. I think that we're a little more self-aware than what we were 3 years ago, perhaps. Um,
And yeah, no more Tiger King. So a lot of it's changed.
yes. um,
Oh my God.
Gosh, I so appreciate everything that you've shared today, Nathaniel, and I'd love
Thank
to
you.
have you back again. And I want to know more about
I'd
your
love to.
research. I'd love to have
Yeah.
you come back and talk about that some more. Any
Phenomenal.
closing thoughts for people that are curious about demonology? If someone came
Oh
up to you and said, "I want to be like you," what would you say?
no. Don't. It's cost me a lot, even mental health wise. My God. This will be. I have a show Sunday, and I have people wanting me to be on their shows, but I'm taking a mental health break. I went through a divorce few years back, and that's still weighing heavily on me. And like I said, whenever I break through with a new revelation or new insight, there's depression. Everything comes and just hits me hard. It's like, oh my God, that must have mattered, right? That must have really mattered. And so it's the up and downs. It's you know, and I'm trying to be as useful as I can without completely self-destructing. Like I said, you experience them, they experience you. In a lot of the time, they see more into you than you see into them. And then we go away thinking, oh my God, I did something. And then it's like, well, wait a minute, we got you now.
Yeah,
So be wary of that. Find a mentor. One thing that really did change my life, I've absolutely shredded the book because I've read it multiple times. Eros and Evil by Ariel Masters. That will give you insight into the phenomenon, and you'll hear about demonic flights. I thought that you. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, my friends. Maybe we got to do some research and do what?
I said,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
and and then I have some books here. Oh, by the way, my buddy Nicholas Renaud sent me. For those who like Malachi Martin, he sent me a copy of The Windswept House, A Windswept House,
Okay,
with Malachi Martin's autograph on it. Holy smokes!
nice.
So, but yeah, you don't want to be me. Nobody would. I wouldn't if but I'm just being honest with you guys. But if you want to understand at least the motifs, the nuances, the depth of the phenomenon, don't start with UFO abductions. Start with witch air literature and ask yourself, are these really demons? Are they really devils? And then once you get into the UFO abduction phenomenon, ask yourself, are these really ETs?
Right.
That will help you. Then you'll see beyond the veil and be like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's really going on? Why are ETs responding to incantations?
Right.
Wait a minute
Right.
here.
Right. Hello.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
fascinating. That is fascinating. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on today, and thank you for all
Thank
of
you for
your
having
information, and all of your suggestions are great. I appreciate
me.
it so
I
much,
hope.
and we will
Yeah.
get back with you again soon. This is
All right.
Holly and Nathaniel saying thank you for listening, and this is Holly's Pandorium podcast. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Holly's Pandorium. If you have stories to share, you can find me on hollyspandorium.com, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and our wonderful Metal Cross Radio at radioking.com. Thanks again for listening.